Hi, Pam. It's great to have you with us today, and we've got lots to talk about. So, if you could just introduce yourself for our supporters, and then we'll talk about your new book.
Well, thank you so much, Lucy, for having me. I've been looking forward to our chat. I'm a psychologist. I specialize in my research in the NHS was with the under sixes with emotional behavioral problems. Then I went on to do a parent advisor course there myself, so I could actually advise parents with, with issues that their children were having. And I've written a lot of self-help books. After I left the NHS, I started doing a lot of media work. And so I've finally written my first children's book after all those adult self-help books.
Yeah. Oh, no, that's great. So, what's the book called, and what's it about?
It's called Eva the Bear and the Magic Snowflake. I hope you can see it okay.
Yeah.
It really is a kind of, I hate to say old-fashioned adventure, but it kind of is, because nowadays so many children's books have these totally irresponsible messages about, well, Eva the Bear could be, Evan the Bear and turn into a boy, or Edward the Bear. All these messages that I feel are absolutely wrong for young children. They should not be confused by all this ideology coming through in their storybooks. So this was based, I started writing stories when my first granddaughter was born just over 7 years ago. And a year or two after that, my agent started trying to find a publisher. And it took forever. He went to about maybe 13, 14 publishers. And they kept saying, well, Pam's known for adult self-help. So it'll be really hard to place her in the children's market because it's a very competitive, crowded market. He finally found a publisher who said, yes, we will buy Eva the Bear and the Magic Snowflake. And this happened to be written based on my second granddaughter, who's now 4 and a bit over 4.5. And her name is Eva, and her nickname is the Bear, because right from when she was a little tiny baby, she was trying to hurdle herself places. She skipped the crawling phase. And so she's very rambunctious, full of gusto, loves her football, very, quite tomboyish, but also loves party dresses, funny enough. And so this is about Eva the Bear, and she goes off an adventure, and her parents have warned her, beware, this, like the snow is coming, there's a big snowstorm, and she gets trapped. And with her own courage and digging deep, and the magic snowflake sprinkling a little bit of magic into the story, she does find her way home safely. So that's the kind of gist, that children can dig deep, that they really have a lot of self-reliance. Children are stronger than we think they are. And so that's why I kind of call it old-fashioned. But I think it's quite sad to call it old-fashioned.
I know,
You know,
I know. It's quite alarming, isn't it, the state of the children's publishing industry these days? I mean, we've heard from parents for really worried and upset about what they're seeing in children's libraries and in school libraries. Like you've said, we've seen drag ABC, just ridiculous things, and it seems like children's publishing is very fixated, a lot of it, on sort of bringing in these ideas about just adult ideas and adult gender and sexuality that I don't think that children should be exposed to at such a young age, because it's really confusing and unnecessary, I think, for children of primary school and preschool age.
yeah, absolutely. I think the worst example of that I saw was Granddad's Fetish, which was for children about the granddad was dressed in like a black fetish gear with his boyfriend at a pride march with the little children around. I was like, really? Do 5 and 6-year-olds need to know that granddad had a fetish for like black leather? I mean, it was horrifying.
Yeah.
I believe then the publisher finally bent to some pressure and removed that part of the book where he's dressed in leather. But I'd actually like to see it for myself that they actually did. But there was quite a bit of an uproar, as there should be. With children, Lucy, you have children, I have children, and now I have grandchildren. We've been around with your trust, and I've been around so many children. They are naturally so creative, so inventive. They don't need, these ideas pushed towards them. They just, one day they want to be a pirate, the next day they want to be a princess, and then they're a dragon, you know, let them just be and use that imagination. It is
Yeah,
what is the
I
I
know.
like
Well,
to give.
absolutely. I remember my son. He's now 15 and over 6 foot. But when he was 3, when he was in preschool, I remember going to pick him up one day, and the he was covered in stripes, and he'd gone and got some felt tip pens, and he'd coloured himself in with orange and black stripes. And when it was the show and tell time, he'd said, "Look, I'm a tiger," and so that the staff were really laughing because of his imagination. But imagine if I'd have said, "Well, yes, you are a tiger," which is just seems to be the ridiculous situation that we're in now with some parents and their beliefs about children being who they say they are at really young age, which I think is a really dangerous way of thinking. And I'm not quite sure how we've got to that stage where parents and teachers are affirming really little children as being something other than reality, which how have we got here, do you think?
Well, first I want to say your son must have been so adorable. I just love that story. I mean, we don't need to feed them all this BS, to put it politely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and now this furry issue has, so there's been this adult movement of furry fetishists who like to dress as furry animals. You know, if they want to do that in the privacy of their own home, I really don't care. If they're consenting adults, that's up to them. But it's now come down through into children, particularly in America. I was reading last week a story about some children being very upset that there was like a fellow student who had come to school as a furry and said, I have to be called whatever it was. I can't remember if they were a teddy bear or a cat. But that is a child who is longing for attention. So why is that child longing for so much attention? What's going on in their home? There's no way that they should be affirmed as a furry, especially with the connotations of adult fetishists. And there's no way their classmates should be put under pressure. And so I'm very concerned that even that now is spreading in school in America, because Lucy, as we know, what happens in America comes here like 5 years later.
Yeah.
We had that first, story online a year ago about the girl who identified as a cat somewhere in this country. People kept saying, no, no, that wasn't true. And then other people saying, oh, yes, it was very true. So we don't know really if it's actually happened here, but if it's happening over in the States, it's going to be happening here where kids want to identify as furries and they want full affirmation. As if a teacher doesn't have enough responsibilities without worrying about affirming children in either a new gender, or as a furry.
I know, I know. It's crazy, isn't it, that there isn't this professional curiosity on behalf of teachers to actually want to understand where this is coming from. I remember going into a local college near where I live before Christmas because I was doing some work with English with some teenagers. And there was a girl who came into the class who didn't speak, so she would have been 16 to GCSE. She didn't speak, and I was trying to engage with her, and the teacher gave me a note just to say that this child was nonverbal, was autistic, and had a mental development age of about 10. And it was clearly that this was a girl. She was a very small girl with short hair, and the teacher introduced her with a boy's name and was referring to her by boy's pronouns, which I thought was very odd. So afterwards, I said, well, what's the situation there? I said, because that child's clearly a girl. And the teacher said, oh yes, well, she was a girl last year, but now he's a boy, and that's just how it is. And I kind of thought, can you not see the underlying issues here? That there's an awful lot going on, and you're not investigating that. You're just taking it as face value and not actually understanding that the harm that you're doing by actually affirming this clearly quite disturbed child as the opposite sex. And it was I would hope now, after the results of the cash review, that teachers would actually start to question this and go beyond the ideology into thinking actually what is going on with these children, what's gone on in their family, what's gone on, what have they seen online, what's happening to them for them to want to identify out of their biological sex. So I would hope that there's a change. I mean, what do you think? Do you think it's going to be a step change now?
I think we all keep saying the tide is turning, but my fear, Lucy, is there are teachers who are utterly captured by this ideology and believe that biological reality, the biological sex, is not the truth anymore. They believe that there is such a thing as a gendered soul. And when you you enter into that kind of cult-like thinking, it's very hard to change that. And you asked me, a minute ago, where do I think this all came from? Well, one person I follow on X wrote a great, big, wonderful essay about the origins of this gender ideology movement, and it's scary reading. You go back to, say, 30 years ago, and the people who started talking about gender also talked about that when it comes to children, children's sexuality is important, and that children are sexual beings. And it kind of went hand in hand. And it's very disturbing that it's kind of like pedophilic thinking. And some of these people who started with gender theory and stuff were actively promoting pedophilia. So there's a horrific history to this. And I'm not saying, obviously, that everybody who's bought into gender ideology, they're not all pedophiles. Of course they're not. But there are very dark roots to the heritage of this movement.
Yeah.
So something that has gone under the radar for most people. I think people who've bought into it are very naive. They do not know where this has all come from. And they do not know that these people on that fringe are pushing, for pedophiles to now be rebranded as MAP, minor attracted people. And that is very disturbing. They're trying to turn it into a sexuality, just like if you're straight, gay, lesbian, or bi. No, it's not. So there are, historically, comes from a very, very disturbing place.
Yeah.
And I just wish people would open their eyes to where this, and how the fringes are pushing for this disturbing thing about, oh, there's nothing wrong with children being sexual with adults. Well, there's everything wrong with that.
I know.
And it's scary.
It is scary. Having read the recent reports about from the report on childhood sexuality from the World Health Organization and also the UN, reading their manifestos was actually very similar to reading the paedophile information exchange manifesto, which was obviously very popular in the 70s in the UK, and actually were quite sort of open and had spoken to parliamentarians and had got quite sort of in there with the Labour Party, which is quite scary before people actually open their eyes and realise actually this is not all right to be accepting paedophilia. But it seems that we are in danger of history repeating itself. And I suppose that is one of the problems with the revisionist society at the moment, because a lot of people want to get rid of history they don't like and just pretend that it didn't happen. And I think the problem with that is that you forget how these things have happened before, and we are in danger of actually opening that up to normalizing adults wanting to sexualize children. So I think you're right that we do need to open our eyes and realize how dangerous this is.
Yes. And so, again, I think people who have kind of bought into it, as a psychologist, I know that even if you start giving them information like, do you know on the fringes of what you bought into, it's this movement to rebrand pedophiles? And they, unfortunately, that cult-like mentality tends to just go into denial. Oh no, those people aren't involved with us.
Suppose this goes hand in hand with what's going on with children looking at inappropriate things online and getting sucked into the gender cult and other really harmful things where they're being indoctrinated and groomed. I saw a really alarming statistic from Ofcom the other day. I'm not sure if you saw it, and it was talking about the number of children online, and it's a third of 5 to 7-year-olds not only have unsupervised access to the internet, but a lot of them actually have their own social media profiles between the ages of 5 and 7, which I find astonishing, and I can't understand why parents are letting them do that. I mean, why do you think that is? Do you think they're just using mobile phones and devices as a babysitter?
I was appalled when I saw those Ofcom statistics. Totally agree with you. They are not parenting their children. parents like that have absolutely, I actually think a lot of people should not have had children. What I see sometimes, there are great parents out there, absolutely great. But of this generation of parents who have, young children, so let's say people in their 30s, up to mid 40s, whatever, what I'm seeing, and they often come to me and say things like, my child is out of control. Well, because you haven't set any boundaries. Children need boundaries. Now, I like to couch it in the terms of the foundation points of the day, which are critical to a child's well-being. They need breakfast. If they're still at home, they need their nap time. They need their lunchtime, they need their tea time, they need their bath time, and they need story time in bed. Those foundation points of the day are so important. Between those, I like to talk in terms of flexible firmness. You are flexible with the time between that. You introduce your child to all sorts of activities, all sorts of outings. You're still a bit firm with boundary setting. That's crucial. Children feel more secure with boundaries. And what I'm seeing from a lot of parents is the inability to set boundaries. And that comes to what you have brought up with the Ofcom study, the statistics. They have not set boundaries. They're just ignoring their children on phones. They're giving the phones for babysitters. They're giving tablets as a babysitter. It's like, say the generation before might have used TV as a babysitter. At least if it was terrestrial TV without all the satellite channels we have now, in a sense, a child was more protected. Now that they're online young children, I am outraged that any parent would do that. And I am quite happy to say that is extremely poor parenting if they allow that. Now, when my children were teenagers, I finally gave them mobile phones, which are kind of just becoming big then, that could only text, because that's all we could get.
Yeah.
20 years ago, we had mobiles that you could text from. So for their safety, from about 15, they were allowed them. But the phones came in my hands at night, so they couldn't text their friends at night.
Yeah.
Because all children, I had their phones at night. They were never allowed phones at the dinner table. Family dinners are sacrosanct in our house. And that is still the case. No one, and we have a big extended family, and I regularly host all the family over. No one has their mobile phone at the table. Those boundaries are crucial. It means that parents, when you have younger children, are interacting more with their children when they set those boundaries. And with older family members, my children now have children, it's just good for everyone and for the young ones to know that everybody's talking.
Yeah.
It's not the Walton family. We have our differences, so I'm not proposing that my family is Walton family, but we use boundaries. And a lot of parents in this generation have lost sight of that. And Lucy, I'm sure you've seen it. You're on a journey, you stop for a coffee somewhere, and there's a mom on her phone, a dad on his phone, and the kids on their tablets. No one's talking.
Yeah.
That is not family life. There's a place for being online, and there's a really important place for just, family life.
Yeah, definitely. It is. It's really depressing. Same as if I go out for a meal, I try to do. I have 3 children, and I try to do regularly one-on-one with children, and take them out to do something. We go to the theatre or go to some events, and we'll have a meal. And frequently we'll go out, and I'll see everybody else just on their phones and not talking to each other. And you kind of think, why have you gone out if you're just going to look at your phone? It's just absolutely crazy. But I was talking to, before Christmas, I was speaking to a psychotherapist called Erica Commissar, who is based in New York, and she has written a book called Being There, which is about how to raise resilient children. And one of the things that she'd spoken about, which she actually thinks is an issue which has come ahead of the mobile phones, and almost why so many parents use these phones as babysitters, because of the amount of children who are now raised right through to school. They spend most of the time in group childcare, large nurseries, and so they're not actually spending much time with their small children. Because you imagine if a child's in nursery from, say, 8 in the morning till 6 at night, that's probably only a couple of hours that these little children and babies are awake. when they're actually at home and spending most of the time with strangers, and often with the ratios are very large. And then so she said that there's a lot of children where the attachment bonding has just not happened because they spent most of the time away from their parents. And I just wondered what you'd seen in terms of your practice with attachment bonding issues within families with small children.
Well, I think I would very much agree with her. And another study that came out a year or so ago found that children who spend exceptionally long times in nursery are more aggressive too, because they're kind of fighting their own corner. So there's more aggressive behavior. There are some positive things that have come out of nursery care. You know, I can't remember them exactly right now. I didn't know we were going to go down this route.
Yeah.
I can't remember, but I do remember there were some positive things coming out of nursery care. My feeling is I am sorry we're living in a generation where parents don't have more choice because of the economics of the family and economics of family life now. Many parents have to both go out to work, and they have to commute, and it makes the day so long. And I feel that is really hard on children who have the very long, the wraparound days where they go for breakfast and they have tea and they've had the whole day in nursery care. And I think that is extreme. I know some parents who are lucky enough, maybe they work locally. I know someone actually local to me. They can drop their child just before 9:30 when they go to their work here in my area at 9:30. And then they pick them up at 5:15 sharp. But that's an exceptional working day. A lot of people don't have that working day.
Yeah.
So that is a huge question for our government and what they want the next generation to be like, that parents have more flexibility, even considering stay-at-home mums getting many more benefits.
Yeah.
Or stay-at-home dads, if the mum is the main breadwinner. Again, I have friends like that. The mum's the main breadwinner and the father did end up, as we say, a house husband or whatever they say. But I don't think we have that flexibility yet. We just do not have the benefits for parents to make those.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's what I find concerning about the government, our current government, and possibly if the Labour Party are to get in at the next election, they're going down the same road, that they're all pushing free subsidised childcare, even from as young as babies being 9 months, and without that option that some other countries have, where actually that there is an option that instead of the free childcare vouchers, that money can actually be given to the family for them to use how they see fit, and which would in some cases allow mums or dads to stay at home longer with their babies. And I really wish that both of the major political parties would actually see the importance of this and the importance of family and the attachment for the children. And I feel that they're not looking at the long-term consequences of this, and that we're seeing now that our children now are probably the most anxious that they've ever been. We've got such a huge rise in mental health issues with young children. And I saw a report, I'm sure you did recently, that even children as young as 10 in this country are being prescribed antidepressants. And I feel that they're looking at, we need more mental health care, we need more mental health support, but they're not actually looking at what's causing it. They're just treating the symptoms and not the cause.
Exactly. That's back to front thinking.
Yeah.
If parents had more options like that with childcare and could really, and I'm sorry, I'm going to say this, it's going to sound like the nanny state. I'm advocating now. I think every parent to be should have parenting courses and learn about boundary setting, learn about screen time. And I don't know why they're not providing this. It was a bugbear when I was in the NHS, and I left 20 years ago. So although I'm still keep in touch with a lot of colleagues, and also as a member of the BPS in certain divisions, I get a lot of updated research. But even back then, we were worried 1 in 4 children in the health authority that I worked in had mental health issues. So even then, now it's more like 40%. And a lot of modern living is responsible for this. A lot of children, unfettered access, as we were just talking about, to being online. That's what they're learning from. They're not having face-to-face loving, or firm, conversation where the parents need to set boundaries or whatever.
Yeah.
So the government is missing the whole thing. If they just look at the mental health stats of young children, how they were 20 years ago, compare them, we have a much bigger problem than when I was in the NHS. And it is down to modern living, online living, 100%.
Yeah.
And parents relying on online to babysit their children.
I know it's quite scary. I mean, we've seen obviously quite a lot. There's been a lot of talk about banning smartphones for children under the age of 16, which, while I agree that children under 16 shouldn't be having smartphones, I don't think that they're necessary, because there are all kinds of, I suppose, what they call brick phones if you just want to call and text. And in fact, my eldest daughter, who's 17, she finds the mobile phone such a distraction that she's actually asked me, can I just buy her a flip phone so that when she's at school, she just calls and texts, but she doesn't want the distraction of it constantly pinging with social media and Snapchat and things like that. So I thought, gosh, she'd actually realise what a distraction it is. But I'm not sure how that would work in practice in terms of banning mobile phones, because it's not children who are buying them, it's the parents who are buying them and getting the contracts. So I wonder whether we need some kind of public information campaign, like I remember those when I was at school. There was all kinds of public information campaigns that would come on terrestrial TV about those. I remember one about HIV. There was one, I remember one of watching an assembly about not climbing on electricity pylon because you might die, and the ones about not going on train tracks. They were quite shocking, I remember, as a child, because they've still stayed with me now. And I wonder whether it's about time we brought these back so that parents know the dangers of what could happen in terms of the child's development and the risks of being online. So I'm just not sure whether actually banning things is enough.
I agree with you there. It's if it was easily done, I would say ban all children under 16 having a smartphone. No child under 16 needs a smartphone. Children who maybe, let's talk about country living, where it may be harder, the buses are infrequent, and the child needs to be able to text mom and dad and say, oh, the bus is taking forever. I can understand that some younger children even need phones, but that's a rarity.
Yeah.
Children don't actually need phones. They do not need phones. Why do they need phones? My children were fine without phones until they were 15, 16. Now looking back, at that time, did I have any problems with them? No, because I was such a strict mom that, the phones came back to me. The phones came back to me. But if you're not going to be a strict parent, then we need people to be, somehow sanctioned or told or know that what they're doing, buying their child a smartphone, is just wrong. I don't know how we go about it, Lucy. I heard many debates about this not a year ago, about a month ago. It was all in the news. About shall we ban for under 16s. I'm completely for a ban. I don't care, again, people can accuse me of nanny state. What it's doing to children, it's just not healthy. It's not good. And I just so sorry for this generation. They've been an experiment for online living.
I know. That's the thing, isn't it? That the way that we're experimenting on children at the moment, like I said,
and with gender ideology, big experiment.
Yeah, huge. I think there's experiments in a lot of issues now with children. We've got the gender ideology and also the pushing of adult sexuality onto very young children and confusing them, and then the mobile phones, and also I would argue with the pushing of full-time state subsidized childcare from them being babies. That is a social experiment as well. It's I feel very sorry for children at the moment. I just feel that they're facing so many things that you and I didn't face growing up, and especially for teenagers, because it's hard enough going through puberty anyway without all of these other issues that are coming to play.
Bombarded by stuff. Which, if you've got that smartphone in your hand, you are bombarded. I don't know who would turn off, say their social media apps, take them off their phone. They're not going to. Your daughter's an exception, and there are probably other exceptions who are saying, I don't want all that stuff. I just want a basic phone for communication. But the more we can get this out there, this message, the more that, stats like the Ofcom stats, but ultimately it comes down to individual parents who hear this stuff and say, okay, I'm going to make a change, and the government.
Yeah.
And schools. There are schools who are successfully, kids arrive with their mobile phones, and mobile phones get locked away for the day. Why isn't every school doing that? Why should any school allow children to have their phones during the day?
I know. It's there are some, because Catherine Burblesy from the Michaela School, obviously that was recently in the news about the court case with the ban on prayer, which they're very, very strict with the mobile phones, and she said that since they did ban them, that they've seen an increase in their academic results, going up. She said it would be really interesting to do a study on that. So you look at the evidence. We've got to be evidence driven, haven't we? You look at the evidence, you see the harm that comes from mobile phones, and then obviously I think that children's attention spans are actually reducing because of time on apps like TikTok, because they're driven by that's what they're driven to be addictive, aren't they? These algorithms that they reduce their concentration.
Well, the dopamine hits that kids get every time someone likes a post of theirs or they see something exciting. The brain reward center gives a hit of dopamine. And then that lays down new neural pathways of reward, that the child feels reward when they start looking at these things. So it's highly addictive to keep getting that dopamine hit back on. They go back.
Oh, it's really scary. And so I think we need sort of coming back to the book, I think we really need a big push on like healthy, old-fashioned, you might call them old-fashioned, but they're they've proven that they're just so good for children. I think we need to get back to promoting books and reading. Certainly with my children, it's the ones that have phones, it's no phones, at bedtime we read instead, because it helps you just to chill out before you go to sleep. So I think less phones, more books. I think really should be the message.
Bear and the Magic Snowflake.
Exactly right. Well, we're almost out of time, so I just wondered if you could, so for people who would like to actually buy the book, where can they buy it from?
Oh, it's available on Amazon, and funny enough, the other night there was like one copy left, more coming soon, and then it was back in stock. So I was glad to see that it was back in stock. So they can also go to my publishers, Austin Macaulay, but obviously Amazon's so streamlined for people because they've already got their addresses put in and everything and whatever.
Okay, great. Okay, right. Well, I would definitely encourage our supporters to, if you've got small children, you've got grandchildren, godchildren, get a hold of the book. It's just so nice to see a lovely children's storybook, which has got a lovely message in there, and is really great for encouraging children to dig deep and be resilient, which is I definitely think we need more of that now, and especially if they establish these skills when they're very small, that as you'll know, that this helps them in adolescence. To navigate puberty and all the challenges that come with it. If they've got that grounding there from being young children, it definitely makes adolescence easier to navigate through.